Hi, I'm Michael Brooks, and I'm filling in for Sam Cedar. And joining me now is Reza Aslan. He's a senior adjunct fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. How you doing, Reza? Good to be talking with you.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. So I want to get into the Hagel nomination. We're kind of mid sort of farce right now, and maybe by the time this interview is airing, the confirmation he will already have been confirmed. But we're mid sort of pseudo filibuster right now, I guess. Republicans are filibustering him, but basically acknowledging that he will eventually be confirmed. But you have a recent column where I think if you kind of step back from some of the sort of theater of what's happening, uh, the nomination of Chuck Hagel represents some really significant things in terms of possible shifts in U.S. foreign policy. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of reasons why some of the Republicans seem to have a problem with Chuck Hagel's nomination as Secretary of Defense. Some have made a big cause about his anti-nuclear proliferation stance, the fact that he was, until quite recently, a board member of the Plowshares Fund, where I, to be fair, am also a board member, a nuclear nonproliferation group. Some have made a big deal about the fact that he has talked about a possibility of containment when it comes to Iran and direct negotiations. He's also called, as you know, for negotiations with Hezbollah and Hamas, which in the United States apparently is some kind of sin, even though the Israeli government negotiates with both of them on a regular basis. But to be perfectly frank, as I think most of your listeners recognize, the biggest issue, the biggest hurdle has been Hagel's supposed anti-Israel stance. After all, Israel was mentioned some 200 times almost during his nomination hearings, as opposed to just a handful of mentions of Afghanistan, where we are actually in the middle of a war.
I think you said
So,
20 mentions.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think you said 20 mentions of Afghanistan in your column.
Right. Yeah, about 20 mentions of Afghanistan, exactly, as opposed to, I think, something like 160 mentions
Hmm.
of Israel. So I don't think that you need to jump to any kind of great conclusions to admit that the biggest hurdle seems to be right now Hagel's supposed anti-Israel stance, which I personally think is just a farce.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit more because it seems sort of ironic is that in Washington right now, having a radical stance on Israel and in the Middle East seems to mean that you actually just publicly and vocally support what actual U.S. foreign policy is, which is in support of a two-state solution, opposed to settlement expansion, and for a kind of negotiated settlement along the 67 lines. Now, in the first part of the in the first Obama term, there was some push initially to halt settlements. That didn't go so well, and then they sort of backed off of it. Do you think that this pick of Hagel signifies that we're going to see something different along those lines in the second term?
I do think that the choice of Hagel for defense secretary does indicate a new strategy towards Israel. And I think it's important to understand this because President Obama is not a fool. He obviously knew that in picking Chuck Hagel, that he was picking a bit of a fight with Senate Republicans and with the pro-Israel community in D.C. I mean, he would have to have been quite ignorant to not realize that that was going to happen. So the only logical conclusion is that he did so because he was sending a message. And I think many in the foreign policy establishment recognize what that message is. It's not a turn away from Israel. It's by no means an attempt to downgrade or diminish America's relationship with Israel. But it is a recognition that the interests of Israel and the interests of the United States are no longer quite in alignment in the way that they were in the past. On the contrary, in a lot of cases, the interests of the United States and the interests of Israel actually clash. And, you know, the great sin, as you know, that Chuck Hagel committed was in vocally saying that the United States interests come first, that he is a representative of the United States, that he takes an oath to the American Constitution, not the Israeli Constitution. There actually is no Israeli Constitution, but you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
But that in the notion that a senator or an ex-senator and soon to be member of the administration would vocally state that his loyalty, that his concern is first and foremost to the United States, and that there are times in which the interests of the United States and the interests of Israel do not align. And in those cases, obviously, the pursuit of America's interests are paramount. Now, that seems a fairly logical statement. In fact, it would seem a statement that all Americans would want their representatives to say, that they look at their interests first and foremost, which is why I think the overwhelmingly hostile reaction that Chuck Hagel's statements have had, particularly amongst Republicans, but also some Democrats like Chuck Schumer in Washington, D.C., has been greeted with, well, frankly, mockery. If any of your listeners got a chance to see the unaired SNL skit making fun of the nomination hearings, I mean, that, it was obviously satire, but satire is based on truth. I think most Americans are scratching their heads about the sort of ridiculous response that Chuck Hagel has had to what I think, again, most Americans would recognize as fairly logical, reasonable statements.
So expanding on that a bit, what besides the kind of continued building of settlements, which I think anybody who has any type of interest in a two-state solution, if people still think that that's viable, would see as a direct impediment to the peace process, that being obviously a clear conflict. What beyond that is an area today that you would say there's a clear strategic divergence between the United States and Israel, even sort of beyond the settlement issue?
Well, obviously, the settlements, as has been repeatedly noted by thousands of Israeli politicians, defense ministers, Mossad, Shin Bet officers, the settlements are a policy that has been, frankly, deliberately designed to ward off the possibility of a two-state solution. I mean, when the Oslo Accords were signed in 1993, essentially laying out the framework for a two-state solution, a safe and secure Israel living side by side with an economic and politically viable Palestine, there were about 100,000 Israeli settlers in the land that Oslo more or less designated to be the future Palestinian state. 2.5 decades of peace processes and accords and declarations and quartets and everything else that you can imagine, roadmaps, and that number is now 500,000. So I think it's important to understand, and frankly, this again in the United States seems to be somewhat heretical to say, but the Israeli public, the Israeli politicians, the Knesset, the ruling members of the Israeli government have all made this very clear, that the settlements have been, for the last 4 decades or so, a deliberate policy on the part of successive Israeli governments to, as they themselves put it, create facts on the ground. Those facts on the ground are meant to essentially ward off a final solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for as long as possible in order to maintain a permanent presence on the Palestinian land. And frankly, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, the fact of the matter is that currently the biggest sticking point to the possibility of a two-state solution is the so-called 67 borders. And the biggest impediment, of course, is the Herculean effort, if not impossible effort, to either remove these settlements or to create some kind of equitable land swap that would still allow for some sort of viable Palestinian state. And not only does that seem like a very difficult, if not, as I say, impossible task, but it's one that the political establishment, certainly the ruling Likud party, has shown no appetite to even discuss, let alone implement.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting is if you read statements from Israeli politicians, you'll either hear from people like an Ehud Olmert a warning that the settlements are destroying the possibility of a two-state solution, or members of Likud and other far-right parties that are emerging uh, a statement of reality that they are committed to never having a one-state, two-state solution happen. So, I think you're right, and there
Yes,
is much more public
and
knowledge
I
of
think I
that.
think that's actually, you bring up a very good point, Michael, because the fact that now you're hearing both from the left and the right that the settlement, not just the settlements that are already there, but settlement policy, the ongoing construction of settlements in the occupied territories, is something that is not going to be halted. It's not going to be reversed. And so, again, from the right and the left, you're hearing the same thing, that this is amounting to there is a consensus emerging to the detriment of the state of Israel, that these settlements are going to ultimately lead to a single unified state, what the right in the Israeli spectrum calls the annexing of Judea and Samaria, and what the left is referring to as a binational state. Either way, we are talking about a suicidal policy that is going to ultimately lead to the end of the possibility of a Jewish majority state.
Right. So once again, the point being that actually the sort of best thing you could do as a friend of Israel is to really be aggressive in asserting that this expansion needs to stop. So just sort of pivoting here as we move into the final section of the interview, do you think that the Hagel nomination also signals the possibility of a different approach to Iran, or a different emphasis in terms of striking some type of deal with Iran in the second term? Do you think that's possible, and do you think that that's on President Obama's mind as he picks Senator Hagel for Secretary of Defense?
Yes, well, actually, I think it's important to understand, both with regard to Iran and with regard to Israel, that the policy is going to be set by President Obama, not by the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
However, in this case, I don't think that there's that much daylight between Secretary or presumptive Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel and President Obama when it comes to how to deal with Iran. I mean, obviously, Obama, especially during the elections, was forced into making certain statements that were very hawkish, very robust about what he is willing to do to keep Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Occasionally, his statements sounded as though they were coming directly out of the mouth of Benjamin Netanyahu. But if you look at the way that the president has actually, in a very sober-minded way, dealt with the difficulty of Iran's nuclear ambitions, he has never really wavered from his commitment to negotiations and to a diplomatic solution. And I think that that's precisely what Secretary Hagel would say. And in fact, in some of his discussions that he's gotten in some trouble for, when he has talked about the fact that sanctions are not helping the situation, that they are not stopping Iran from pursuing its nuclear ambitions. He's absolutely right about that. I don't know who could actually argue with that statement. Iran is further along the nuclear trajectory than it's ever been, and sanctions don't seem to be slowing it down in the slightest. And that the only path forward is a negotiated settlement. I don't see President Obama disagreeing with that. So I think that perhaps what this does is it creates a better runway for the president to deal with the Iran situation. But frankly, that's a situation that is as much a hostage to Iranian internal politics as it is to American internal politics. Iran, as you know, is in the middle of a presidential election. The elections will take place in June, but it's also in a place where it's more fractured politically than it has ever been. There is incredible infighting, unprecedented infighting within the Iranian establishment, between the president and the parliament, between the president and the supreme leader. And so in a time in which Iran seems to be deeply, deeply fractured along political lines and preparing for an election that's going to be the first presidential election since the revolution of 2009, as the supreme leader himself said, Iran is not in the mood right now for direct negotiations. I don't think that we should expect anything to happen until after June. But after June, once Iran feels a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more stable, then I think you've got some opening for serious negotiations, because as you sort of rightly mentioned, a lot of the issues, a lot of the sticky issues are more or less agreed upon. I mean, the United States is going to have to confirm Iran's right to enrich uranium, probably to either 3.5 or 5%, in exchange for more intrusive observations of Iran's nuclear program. The fact that Iran has signed its additional protocols under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but has not actually implemented them. And then we're going to have some conversation about the removal of sanctions and perhaps the opening up of trade between Iran and the United States. Everybody knows what has to happen. It's just getting the political will on both sides to do it.
Right. So, just one kind of final question to sort of maybe go a little bit deeper into Iranian domestic politics. I think a lot of people um, had a different image of Iran during the Green Movement of 2009, and whether or not that was informed or accurate or not. People were very inspired by those images and the leadership demonstrated by people like Mousavi and others. And I'm just wondering if you could give an update on where are those leaders still under house arrest or detained, and in this next election, I understand there's a lot of conflict. Is there what we might call a reformist option, or most of those sort of kind of factional fighting that reflects maybe less of an ideological divergence, if that makes sense?
Very, very good question. Yes, the leaders of the Green Movement, Mousavi, Karoubi, are still under house arrest. Their children are still being harassed, but even the people sort of in the center, people like Ayatollah Rafsanjani, have been silenced. His children have been repeatedly arrested and harassed. What that indicates is that there's a misconception in the United States that the Green Movement is dead, that the opposition in Iran has been silenced. Well, if that's the case, then there wouldn't be so much effort on the part of the regime to continue to harass, oppress, arrest, and even in some cases kill those people who were linked to the Green Movement. The regime still sees this as a huge threat. They are far more worried about internal opposition than they are about an Israeli strike or American belligerence. Those things are secondary. As a matter of fact, those things are welcomed. I mean, the only thing that this regime can really hang its hat on to make sure that it maintains a sense of loyalty from the population is the threat of external force. But I think that insofar as electoral politics go, what you're going to see probably, this is my guess, in June, is you're going to see the reformists kind of bow out of this one. Yes, there will be some reformist candidates who will be allowed to run, but I don't think that you're going to see the overwhelming turnout that we saw in 2009. As a matter of fact, I think it's become pretty clear that the Supreme Leader Khamenei has decided that he's going to keep a much closer eye on the presidential elections. He does not want another Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad has been nothing but a headache for the Supreme Leader. He's been brought up for impeachment 3 times. He has overtly challenged the Supreme Leader's control over the Iranian government. And I think that Khamenei, the Supreme Leader, has made it very clear that the next president is going to be somebody that he handpicks this time. But nevertheless, in a sense, at least when it comes to the hope of negotiations with Iran, that might not be such a bad thing, because the more confident the Supreme Leader feels in his control over the Iranian government, the more open he will be to serious negotiations on the nuclear program. But the less control he has, the less open he will be. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be very good for the Iranian people themselves. I think they are in a situation now where they're going to feel even more constricted by the Supreme Leader's grip over that country. But from the American perspective, the upcoming sham elections that we're about to witness may not be such a bad thing in
Right.
trying to at least get the Iranians to the negotiating table to honestly, openly talk about their nuclear program.
Oh, that's very interesting. And Ahmadinejad apparently annoys everybody. And for a lot of these really complicated issues,
He sure does.
we sort of know where we need to go, but it's a question of how we kind of move past the nonsense and get there. Reza Aslan, Adjunct Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, thank you so much, and talk to you soon.